Basically, the presentation was based on, clarifying the definitions for what people call domestic violence, but we use the term intimate partner violence to define it, to talk about the epidemiology of domestic violence, of intimate partner violence, highlighting how common it still is in the United States. So that was part one of the parts of the presentation. The next segment of the presentation is more looking into the psychodynamics of intimate partner violence, the dynamics between couples where there's abuse. And then the last segment of the presentation was geared toward giving some best practices for clinicians who are interacting typically with survivors, with victims of domestic violence, and highlighting a model of care that we developed at Columbia, where we are providing psychiatric services within a non-specialty setting. So basically an initiative that's available here in New York City, but also in other cities across the US and in other countries, where survivors of intimate partner violence connect to advocates, to attorneys, to case managers, to people helping them, connect them to services. And at the same time, our initiative involved including a psychiatrist within this context. So we basically talked a little bit about what the initiative is like, hoping to provide some recommendations for clinicians who are interacting with survivors and just highlighting how common it is for clinicians. It's like a multi-effort, initiative from different segments and different types of services. So the Family Justice Center initiative was actually developed in San Diego, in California, and it's a one-stop shop for services, for intimate partner violence survivors. So that initiative that started in California was expanded throughout the U.S. and here in New York, the major has an office to combat domestic violence. So they've allocated funding to create the centers throughout the different boroughs in New York City. So that has been up and running for a while, and our contribution to this initiative was basically including the mental health services, the psychological and psychiatric services within that model. And that was done, by a team at Columbia. That's actually the women's program in psychiatry, with funding from the Chapman Perelman Foundation. So it's philanthropic, foundation that provided that funding so that we could get started. This started in 2014, and now at this point was, a successful pilot that is now in the process of being replicated to the other family justice centers across the New York City, and that's receiving funding from the city. So actually, the major is funding this initiative, because as probably some of you know, De Blasio has a really, a very strong commitment to mental health.